Hey guys, what's going on? This is your old pal CHH. I want to welcome you to today's video. Now, I really hope you can indulge me today because I really think that this is genuinely one of the best Scream Factory Blu-ray releases of all time. It covers everything. It's for a movie that I love and I just want to get more attention on it. I look at people's collections sometimes. I'll look and see what's on the shelf, and a lot of times I don't see this one. Now, that's not to say that I can convince everybody to like a movie that I like, but when it comes to their catalog, this is, in my opinion, one of their best releases of all time. The movie in question is Return of the Living Dead Part 2. Now, I know I love the movie. I even have them tattooed on me, but hear me out. Listen, nobody will ever argue, especially me, that the first Return of the Living Dead is one of, if not the greatest horror films of all time. I think it's the greatest horror comedy ever. The thing about Part 2 that's interesting is there's a gentleman named Tom Fox. Now, why is his name important? Well, because he was the producer of these films, and he didn't understand the movie business whatsoever. He wanted to do a sequel that basically was the first movie again, almost like a remake, but just change it to where it's an alternative universe. Sounds kind of crazy, and it is crazy because fans were like, this isn't really a sequel, is it? Return of the Living Dead Part 2 definitely has its own feel and feels like a movie that, you know, it's like an alternate universe. Now, looking back now, you could kind of see that as being somewhat unique, but at the time, especially seeing these movies for the first time, when you watch Part 1 and you see that there's a Part 2, you can't wait to see what happened. Did other people in the group survive? What happened to everybody? Suicide going to come back as a zombie? What's going on? Just indulge me for a second. Tom Matthews and James Karen come back as grave robbers. That's their job. So it's already a tongue-in-cheek movie from the start, because when Joey, played by Tom Matthews, goes to start his first night on his job where his restless girlfriend wants to go out and have a good time, his job is an illegal criminal job. It's ridiculous to start out. And then the movie goes through the premise of a young kid. Now, that is a big turnoff for me. Something about watching kid horror movies, I'm never that interested in them. Now, ironically, there have been some that I've become really fond of, like Abigail, and of course I love Halloween 4 and 5, but other films I don't love so much. There are certain movies that feel nostalgic, and then there's other movies that truly transport me back to feeling like a kid again. For me, Return of the Living Dead Part 2 absolutely makes me feel like a kid again. I absolutely love the tongue-in-cheekiness of this, but the real magic in Part 2 is Kenny Meyer's effects work in this one. Now, he was told he could not really make the zombies look like what was done in the first film for legal reasons. Understandably so, Kenny went in a different direction. And when I think of Return of the Living Dead Part 2, I always think of the color blue. I think of those amazing blue hues that you see in the movie. I think of those amazing zombie makeup effects that are done in this film. Arguably, Part 2's zombie designs way outperform the first one. And that's not my opinion. That's fact. Okay, maybe it is my opinion, but my point is the zombie makeup in Part 2 is incredible. Here's another thing I gotta mention before we talk about why I genuinely think this release is one of the best Scream Factory ever done, because no, it's not just about the movie. The soundtrack for Part 2 is equally as great. Now, while Part 1 had this extremely uniform punk rock body of work, Part 2 goes in a different direction by just taking a lot of the songs that are from the Island Records record label at the time, and you have bands like Anthrax. It showed me Julian Cope with Space Hopper, which Julian Cope's record, St. Julian, that has that song, has become my favorite record of all time. And that's a shoot. Wrestling term for I'm being serious. Other bands like Leatherwolf, and of course Joe Lamont's Flesh to Flesh, one of the greatest 80s rock songs of all time, is in this movie. It's an incredibly fun film, and then of course there's the Michael Jackson zombie at the end. Unfortunately, that's played by Brian Peck, but it's Michael Jackson as a zombie at the end. I love that part. All in all, I just want to say that I adore this movie. I think it's extremely fun, and while it doesn't scale the heights of what Part 1 did, the people involved made a great zombie film. It has the tonality of something that is unique, typically something I don't really go for, but just works. Part 2 works on every level, and I think on repeat viewings, you'll get just as much out of it, if not more, when you go back and watch it. There is a comfort level to this movie that cannot be duplicated. So, why do I think this is one of the best Blu-ray releases Scream Factory ever did? Okay, well, let's start just by the visuals. I do think that this is a gorgeous Blu-ray release, and I love the artwork. I believe they got the same artist to do this that did the Part 1 Blu-ray, which I still think is a collector's item. If you can get your hands on the Scream Factory Return of the Living Dead Blu-ray, I say go for it because I think it looks absolutely fantastic. This one is no exception. I mean, look at it. It's great. You've got Tarman at the top, Tom Matthews. You've got all the actors. I met her. Dana Ashbrook bailed on the convention that I was going to go to at Scarefest to meet him because I need to get him for Part 2. And you've got James Karen with the legendary screwdriver, zombie head. I love the artwork on this. Of course, you can reverse it when you pull this out and have the classic, I call it the tornado zombie, but I think it's really the cloud zombie. People get mad at me when I call it a tornado zombie, but it looks like that to me. Now, here's the thing. This Blu-ray, I'll say this, looks really good. This was a 2K scan from the Inner Positive, which isn't the best case scenario, but it's also not the worst case scenario. This could have just been a studio master that they got and put it out on Blu-ray, but the fact that it says new restoration from the Inner Positive, this Blu-ray looks really good. There is a nice level of grain to this that's not too present, but still a little bit there to give you that old school cinematic feel, and there's a great level of definition. Here's the reality about this. Sometimes my mojo can work and sometimes it doesn't. If I talk about a movie that I love on a Blu-ray release, we could get the announcement for a 4K one day, but listen, I have to say this because it's true. This movie would absolutely rock the house on 4K. It's so colorful. There are so many great looks and designs shot this movie with all the zombie makeups, the nighttime scenes. This movie would rock it on 4K. But with that being said, this looks absolutely fantastic. Why do I think this is the best? Okay, this is where I really mean it. The features on this are some of the absolute best, most informative features I've ever seen for any horror movie, period. There's an interview with Ken Wiederhorn, the director of this movie, on here. What's one of the biggest criticisms we hear about Return of the Living Dead Part 2? Well, number one is that it's basically a ripoff of the movie. And for some reason, the blame seems to go on Mr. Wiederhorn for this a lot of the times. No, I find that interesting because Ken doesn't come across as a guy when you see him talk in this interview like somebody who would rip anything off. He seems like a guy that's brilliant, quite frankly, with a lot of his own ideas. And I like Ken Wiederhorn's movies. I really like Shockwaves, for instance. This is something I learned from this release that I hadn't learned before. Ken Wiederhorn had written a script that was about a movie about grave robbers. It was going to be this sort of comedy film that he wrote. So Tom Fox took that script and basically told Ken, yeah, let's just rework that into a Return of the Living Dead film. So essentially, yeah, it still is like a ripoff of the first movie, but Ken had a whole script for a different movie altogether for something else that got shoehorned into this. And I think it's important to note because I think Ken gets a lot of crap for that when in reality he had to rework a script that already existed that he wrote into this film and make it seem like a Return of the Living Dead film. There's a lot of things I learned about Kenny Myers, the work he did on this, the special effects. Kenny even got into true detail about the history of him with this film, about how he felt making it, and he even talked about something so cool. There is a scene in this movie where there is a gentleman that was portraying a zombie that didn't have a bottom half of his body. He did a scene as a zombie that is amazing in this film. And Kenny even talked about years and years later looking in a book about movie reviews at some sort of college library or something that did a review on this and really praised that scene. That actor that had no bottom half portraying a zombie in here that thought it was so impressive. And it meant a lot to him. Kenny, it was really a therapy interview, to be honest with you, which makes this so cool because it felt so real. It wasn't so I got the job for the film when I auditioned for this. No. Kenny talked about his history with this film and got really into the nitty-gritty. It felt like a therapy session about him with this movie. It's one of the best Scream Factory interviews I've ever seen on a release. I'm taking my fandom out of this because I know I love these movies. That interview is incredible. Kenny just bears everything to the camera. I even learned a lot, and quite frankly, this release was very important with me making that video I did about horror's most mysterious DVD release on Return of the Living Dead Part 2 because of the soundtrack stuff on here. We actually got the composer who did the original soundtrack that was on the VHS that was a rehired guy. We learned that there was a score that was done, which I truly believe was put on that DVD release, which is why I think it's a collector's item that accidentally came out on DVD, which is why a lot of people were like, wait a minute, that's not the soundtrack that was on the VHS tape. This release, of course, gives you the soundtrack you're supposed to have. And the composer is interviewed in here and talks all about what happened, about why he got hired, what was told by Ken Wiederhorn. Ken Wiederhorn talks about taking that movie, and again, so important to that video I did, Ken Wiederhorn talked all about taking the movie, putting in the soundtrack that he didn't like, sending it to Lorimar, and them agreeing that they needed to redo the score, and that's when he hired the guy that's interviewed on here. So this release, without this release, I wouldn't have been able to do that video that did so well on the channel and got a lot of crossover reach. This is one of the most informative, intensely entertaining Scream Factory Blu-rays of all time, as much as Part 1's. And I know Part 1's has all the documentaries and stuff on here, and that's another thing I want to add. There was that More Brains documentary that came out in like 2011. Well, as a bonus feature, there were 2 more documentaries, one on Part 2, one on Part 3. This one includes the documentary that's for Part 2 on here. This is truly one of the best Scream Factory Blu-rays of all time. I don't say that lightly. They've done so many great releases, but in terms of the knowledge you'll learn from this, in terms of the look of the film and the artwork, Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is hands down one of, if not the best Scream Factory Blu-rays they've ever put out. And hopefully this video will get somebody to either go pick this movie up and finally check it out, or take it off the shelf, put it on the special features, and just learn. But anyway, guys, I appreciate you letting me indulge a little bit, because I just truly wanted to talk about this release again all these years later. Let me know your thoughts on the movie. Let me know your thoughts on this release, and be honest if you've bought it and never put on the special features. Trust me, you'll learn a lot. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see y'all next time. Huge giant thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you guys, this would not be possible. To get behind the scenes photos, videos, music, private live streams, and much more, you can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Thank you to my patrons.